Hello, everyone. Welcome to our AcademiaSG webinar. AcademiaSG is a collective of Singaporean academics, Linda Lim in the US, Teo Yu Yen and Chong Jia Yen in Singapore, and me, Cherian George, in Hong Kong. We try to promote public-facing scholarship and a more open society in our work. Singaporeans pledge to build a democratic society based on justice and equality requires work on various fronts. In the public sphere, it requires citizens to exercise their right and responsibility to participate in collective self-government. Democracy, of course, always requires us to choose our representatives wisely, as we have done within our limits, within a free and fair electoral system earlier this year. Previous AcademiaSG events and articles have discussed these aspects of Singapore's democratic project. Later this week, though, attention will shift to another key construction site for Singaporean democracy, the House of Parliament. On Friday, President Tharman Shanmugaratnam will open the Republic's 15th Parliament, and Singaporeans' 99 elected representatives will begin their important work. And so this evening, we're going to focus on the work of Parliament. It is, first and foremost, our lawmaking body, responsible for scrutinizing and initiating proposed legislation. Equally importantly, it is the preeminent space for holding the executive branch to account. It is also where national issues are deliberated, and it is where the people's representatives air the views of the people. To help us think through this work, we're honored to have with us this evening two former nominated members of Parliament who served in the 13th and 14th Parliaments, respectively, social entrepreneur Anthea Ong and surgeon Tan Swam, and two of Singapore's most knowledgeable political scientists, Elvin Ong and Walid Jumblatt. Welcome to all of you. I'm going to start by posing a question to Anthea and Swam about your stint in the House. What we academics don't have is first-hand experience as parliamentarians. So can you each tell us perhaps one thing that was a pleasant surprise or that impressed you about how the chamber works, and maybe one thing about parliamentary processes and dynamics that was disappointing and that you hope the 15th Parliament can improve on? Anthea, you want to go first?
Okay. Thanks for having me, Cherian. I was going to, get Swam to go first because she clearly has the recency effect since she's just stepped down from the 14th Parliament. Thank you for having me. Very happy to be here. It was very difficult. If you ask me for one, given that it was such an enriching experience, maybe I'll just very quickly just share about what impressed me most. Wasn't so much, I think, the chamber itself, but the people who make it work. And I think a lot of people outside of Parliament may not realize this, but the clerks, the officers, and for me, especially the Parliament's librarian, were incredibly professional. They were deeply knowledgeable, but more importantly, they were unfailingly respectful and helpful. So they didn't just enforce procedure on us. They certainly helped me navigate it, especially as an NMP stepping in without a party machine behind me, nor given legislative or secretarial resources. So that support meant a lot. I think along the same line would be the PAL SG app, which was a surprise. That was something that allowed us to keep track of what's going on during and between Parliament sessions, but also it helps us to track our media mentions, which I wasn't expecting. Very, very useful. Obviously, it was only for mainstream media, but I'm pretty sure they were also keeping track of the other less savory ones too. Also for me was just how I was received. When I actually, it was nerve-wracking, but I did it anyway when I invited the Parliament to take 3 deep breaths in my maiden speech before I started, highlighting how we need to ground ourselves in the weight of our accountability to the people, right? With what we do, with our attention, our presence, And I, and was interesting to be told that I was bringing humanity into the chamber. My biggest disappointment would not be a surprise for you. It would be around the POFMA debate, where together with two fellow NMPs, I tabled an amendment motion, not to block the bill, but to strengthen it by proposing, safeguards like establishing an independent review council and so forth. We even asked for the whip to be lifted. But instead of having a sort of a genuine engagement, it felt like there was this need to have, especially the PAP MPs really coming at us with each and every one of our proposed amendments. So that was both disappointment, but I would also say a bit of a surprise. And I think that moment for me showed how the House could still err on the side of control and maybe even efficient rather than enabling really more deliberative democracy, because I was actually really proud as a sort of a, NMP thinking, oh, we're making the parliamentary process of the amendment motion work in this case. But yeah, that didn't happen. So what is my hope? Clearly, I would hope for the 15th Parliament not to treat amendment motions or parliamentary petitions as nuances, but as signs of a more vigorous democratic process. So I really would love to see the 15th Parliament move from just efficiency, and we are very efficient, having been someone who's been in it, pushing through question time, second and third readings all within the same time. I would like to see us move from efficiency to effectiveness, so that the debate that we see is less a formality, but more a genuine engagement and deliberation. I would also like to see us have more creativity in this parliament when it comes to addressing our growing and competing priorities, so that we do not simply rely on vouchers as the silver bullet for all the challenges that we have as a nation. As someone who's obviously very concerned always about mental health, psychological impact, our well-being, I'm concerned we may not yet know the psychological implications of this cultural voucher that we are building as a people in the long term. I'm not sure this is actually the best way to build a culture of agency and active citizenship, with aid in dealing with some of our biggest challenges. And I'll just leave one more. One more hope is, as I mentioned in a previous panel discussion we had before GE 2025, I do see us, the citizens, as the hiring managers of MPs. We are the ones sort of employing them. And so I would also use the same analogy to see that the Parliament office, I hope, serves more as an HR manager. And I would like to see more of a review and feedback, and putting more of a performance report card out for MPs in between elections, so as for us to know how they're doing, instead of us relying on independent groups like CAPE and the likes to tell us how our MPs are doing. Because all this information, obviously, it's available, as I mentioned about the PAL-SG app. Okay, I'll stop there so that Swam and the rest can go.
Right. Thanks, Anthea. I mean, one first thing that comes to mind when you mention how sometimes efficiency trumps deliberative quality. I wonder if it's more than efficiency, and maybe it's also partisanship, right? But I'm going to throw that out for later discussion. But I want to hear from Swam first. Same question: what encouraged you about the way Parliament works, and what was disappointing?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I would say as a citizen and as a doctor, I actually had no idea about the process, and I truly was nominated. To put it very badly, I was arrowed to do so, because at that time, I think there's a lot of tension within our community about the tension with insurers and doctors. So my community, the medical association, suggests, hey, Swam, the nomination is open, we nominate you. I actually said, no lah, being president is already hard enough. I don't think I can do right by, the community if I also do this other job. Then 1 week later, they asked me again. Yeah, at that time, I think I was thinking, okay, if I have a larger platform to raise awareness, let's go for it. Then, of course, the interview process and so on and so forth. Within the next 2 months, I think COVID happened, right, in early 2019. So then that gave the doctor, the medical NMP, a lot more opportunity to speak up and to shed some insights on the healthcare system. So I think it's a matter of timing and opportunity to hopefully be able to influence somewhat. So maybe one thing that quite surprised me was I found that most of the MPs, even the ministers, are really friendly and approachable, genuinely, especially when, let's say, during the tea break. I don't know whether Anthea agree. During the tea break, they'll come down to us, sit next to us, and actually welcome us in, ask them personal questions. So very personable people. Then what else? I completely agree that the support system is amazing, right? Right from the security guards, they greet us with such respect, make sure, you know, they wave us in and stuff like that. If the Grab car gets blocked at the gate, they will make sure the Grab car can come in. The librarians are great in helping the research. I think the interpreters are also amazing, because sometimes when I try to do a speech in native tongue, in Mandarin, and my language isn't that great, they help to facilitate some of the phrasing. What else? Yeah, like every aspect of it, even the tea time staff, the aunties are so cute to make sure that, you know, oh, doctor, you came late, do you have lunch yet? So that felt really welcoming. Yeah. What I found disappointing, two ways lah. I may be a bit disappointed in myself for not being better prepared in the parliamentary processes. So the first few months, I think, is almost floundering, very honestly. I mean, for all of you here who are more interested in politics, you would be understanding the system a lot more. So it took us a while to sit and learn and observe first. You know, when do I raise my hand? When can I even stand up and go to the toilet? It's really awkward and embarrassing. Then in understanding what is, you know, when's the timing to introduce a debate, right? What's this thing about first reading, second reading? So I admit to the audience here, right, my whole life is doing medical work, and suddenly having to speak with these politicians, using their language, using their terms, and make myself credible. It took a bit of preparation and studying to insert it at the correct timing to be credible. So maybe, Anthea, that's what took us a while to figure out, isn't it? Rather than study, oh, we want to raise a motion for debate, and then people look at us like, you know, why are you wasting time on this? It's already done and dusted. I said, no, but I still want to say something. And then be, no, I think we should be moving on. And then you felt very like nobody's listening. So I think maybe towards the end of my term, I was able to raise a motion for debate, and I think that went quite well with active participation for most of the MPs. So I'm quite proud of myself for being able to do something meaningful. Yeah, so maybe disappointing as well in that it's a very formalized structure. I find that maybe quite a lot of the speeches, even the PQs, might have covered very frivolous items, and many of us are not really able to speak to the point, right? What are my top 3 points for debate? What are the effective changes that are necessary, and how I think it should be done? Instead, you know, maybe a lot of people I feel anecdotes, emotion, how I feel, and so on and so forth, which takes up a lot of time. So wondering like, you know, how best we can all, you know, move towards that. Then finally, in terms of contributing actively to policy, that's something I think one term is not able to achieve. Yeah, you need to understand the process first, then you need to get to know the people and the ground, and sort of get support before you can introduce something that will effectively pass down into law. So that's what I've learned in that 2-year term.
Thanks so much. Yes, I think you touch on, I guess, an inescapable dilemma, right? I mean, if you're writing a speech as an MP, do you think about connecting with anecdotes, or do you give a very rational policy position? And both have their merits, and you can't do both at the same time. Let me turn to Elvin. I mean, the political context in which the Parliament is going to open is, I think, especially interesting because of the GE that preceded it. After a miserable 2023 for the PAP, we saw the ride-out controversy, corruption and sex scandals, and palpable grievances over the cost of living. The PAP ultimately held the line in May's general election. Lawrence Wong achieved something neither of his predecessors managed to, which was to improve the PAP's share of the popular vote in his debut outing as party leader. So would it be accurate to say that this government enters the, excuse me, enters the 15th Parliament with massive political capital? They've gotten the mandate that they asked for. And so how do you expect Cabinet and the PM personally to use that capital?
Good evening, Cherian. Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for having me today. You're right, Cherian, that the PAP has got a very strong mandate from the people to implement its agenda. And because the PAP is the dominant ruling party in Singapore, it will set the agenda in Parliament. And so what can we expect this agenda to be? And I think we can have some hints of the ideas of what the agenda might be by looking at the Prime Minister Lawrence Wong's speeches for the past 2 years. Last year, he was very much focused on the Forward Singapore movement. And this year, just at the National Day rally, he was talking about having a we first society rather than a me first society, right? So I think people will be very closely, concretely looking at the pragmatic legislation, the practical substantive policies that the PAP will put forward that will manifest this we first society. During the National Day rally, he referred to various examples, of course, as, for example, the ground up initiatives that he was looking forward for different Singaporeans to contribute. And I'm not sure your Hokkien is very good, Cherian. He also mentioned in his Chinese speech the Tiki Siu Ho song, which resonated from my understanding with a lot of Chinese Singaporeans. I heard the radio playing it the other day. And basically the idea was, under this small little umbrella, I will take care of you and you will take care of me when the rain gets harder, right? And so he did mention in his speech, the rain is going to get harder with the global uncertainty. And so practically, what is the PAP going to put forth over the next few years to cultivate this you take care of me, I take care of you kind of political culture, social culture? I think that remains to be seen. I think what Singaporeans should really look out for will be the annual budget speeches. And the next budget will be coming up in February or March 2026, right? Not too far away. With the global uncertainty, with a lot of people facing unemployment, underemployment, I think the government may be thinking about having a much more substantive budget stimulus package potentially in the 2026 budget that will have balancing social support as well as industry support. So I think the annual budget speeches are a key highlight for the PAP government. But in terms of other legislation, I'm not quite sure actually. So it's definitely something to look forward to in the president's speech in next week's parliament. So the first parliament will usually have the president's speech, and the president's speech is typically, if I'm not wrong, written by the PAP government, and that will set tone, set the agenda for the PAP government broadly. And with the president's address, there's also a lot of addendums to the president's address with the different ministries outlining their priorities. So we can look to those clues of the addendums to see what the PAP government will prioritize in the future. Yeah.
Thanks, Elvin. And I should say that we did ask our audience to submit their questions or thoughts in advance. I just want to share a couple of slides worth of the topics, agenda items that audience considers important. And they are very wide-ranging, right? Costs, employment, food security, 10 million can or not, right? How generative AI will affect jobs. What about the price of public housing and the looming lease decay issue, aging population, and so on, right? I'm guessing that our audience is not necessarily representative of the wider population. Nobody has asked for $1 cooking oil for the whole nation. But before we go into specific issues that you think should be high up on the agenda, let me ask Walid a question about the opposition. So the Workers' Party is back to being the only opposition party represented in Parliament, just as it was between 2011 and 2020. It'll have 10 MPs, 2 NC MPs in the House. This is the largest parliamentary presence of any opposition party in the Republic's history. But we already hear some disquiet from opposition supporters For example, just last week, opposition politician Ravi Philemon accused Workers' Party leader Pritam Singh of being too complacent. I quote, "The opposition must show that it is ready to deal with the core, not just polish the surface," Ravi said. So Walid, my question to you is being the only opposition voice a liability as well as a privilege for the Workers' Party? And how do you think the Workers' Party should play its role?
Good evening, Prof. Cherian. Thank you so much. As a friend of AcademiaSG, I'm delighted to be invited again. And firstly, I need to say that I do think Parliament is worse off this time round because we only have...
Sorry, you do or you don't?
I do. Parliament is worse off because we only have two parties, and it is a problem, I think. We have seen the Lisa Dish, she wrote, of course, this is an American context. She wrote a book called The Tyranny of the Two-Party System. And especially when you have a two-party system in a majoritarian or first-past-the-post system voting, the two parties tend towards the median voter. So even theoretically and empirically, we have seen this in others, you tend to get people. Now, it's a good thing in a way. It's a good thing because politics is more moderate, quote unquote. Unlike in a proportional representation system, there's room for extreme views. On the other hand, it does mean that when you go to the median voter, there are people on the margins that are less represented. So this could be a problem. So I do think that Parliament was better off when you had PSP in. For whatever of PSP's limitations, I do think they brought something different, a different dimension to Parliament. And I personally am sad to see only two parties. Now, having said that, I need to caveat whatever I say and whatever Ravi said. Ravi is a friend. But I need to caveat it with this particular fact. I was critical of some of WP's strategies as well in the GE, but Pritam is the most successful opposition leader in our country's history. So he does know a lot of things, I think, more than a lot of us in terms of how he positions. So that is a caveat. And I think it's difficult to say that to levy a criticism towards the WP, saying that Pritam is too complacent or too moderate, because what they would say is, perhaps it is this moderation that has gotten us so far, that Singaporeans have voted for us precisely because they want a PAP-like and PAP-light version. So they want to keep the PAP honest, but they don't want somebody that is too far left, too far right. They want somebody within a similar ideological positioning. And I think the WP would be right in saying that, just looking at the data. Of course, Pritam didn't start this moderation process. It was Lau Tia Kiang, his predecessor, who really made, in Vivian Balakrishnan's words, the WP a half step left to the PAP. So I think it is very difficult for us to say that the WP is complacent, because it has been successful in doing the strategies, in implementing the strategies, the ideologies that has made it successful. Right? So the WP has been moderate in two ways. One, in its ideology, but also in its candidates as well. So that's how the WP has been moderate. So it is not a liability, I think, because the elections have shown that the WP's brand is very much intact. The 2025 elections. This is the first time when there has been a national swing to the PAP, that an opposition party has not been affected by the national swing. In fact, in the constituencies, of course, this is a skewed statistic, in the constituencies that the WP contested, you do see that the WP won more votes than the PAP. So you can't say that it is a liability. I don't think the data bears that out. Now, however, and also, there is nobody that's going to challenge the WP from the left, right? Just based on the first past the post system, people are more likely to vote for two parties, right? Which is why I was very confident that if there was a three-cornered fight, there was very little chance that the third party would get back their deposit. I was very confident about that. This is, again, not unique to Singapore. You see this in many first past the post systems, as Elvin would know. Now, having said that, I think the WP has can say that they can comfortably, confidently reject Ravi's criticism. Having said that, I still have an aspiration, because just as I would like the PM, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, to use his mandate to be bold, which I thought it was a bit disappointing, the National Day rally, because this is his first rally after getting such a strong mandate. I thought he could have been more bold, more ambitious, and introduced a big idea, which I thought it was a mistake not to do that. But I would like the PM to be more bold in using his mandate. I would like the WP as well to be more bold, because its position in the Singapore scene, political scene, is more secure now. So I understand you don't have to deviate too much from the moderate image, the moderate strategies it has put out. But I think there is room for it to fill that gap, not to the extent that the PSP did, but fill that gap a little and be more audacious sometimes in critiquing and criticizing the government, because the WP, I think, has built enough political capital. Now, having said that, we also saw that there are some bad elements, I think, okay, not bad elements, not nefarious, but maybe some disingenuous elements in society, right? When I think last week, just a few days ago, we saw former NMP, Kelvin Cheng, criticizing Pritam, saying that WP was cynical for bringing up Palestine in its manifesto. Now, why do I say that's disingenuous? Because the PAP brought up Palestine as well. Some PAP candidates brought up Gaza and Palestine as well. And Kelvin Cheng never said that that was disingenuous. But my point in bringing that up is that the WP always has to be careful, always has to navigate this. If it goes just a bit more audacious, there will be people, oh, look, they are not thinking about national interest. And national interest in their minds actually is defined by PAP interest rather than national interest. So I would like the WP to be a bit more audacious, but at the same time, I also understand the realities. Now, I think there was a comment by Prof. Yan Chong, Barisan 113 seats of 51. This is pre-independence, of course. I'm talking about post-independence. Singapore, Pritam is the most successful opposition leader. Thank you.
Okay. This point about needing to be careful, I think, is fascinating. And I guess it's difficult for us outside of the political fray and outside of Parliament to understand the various pressures at work. And I'm sure it is something that even NMPs have to grapple with, even though there's no party whip controlling you and so on. There have been occasions in the past when I think we've seen, say, NMPs or even PAP backbenchers, express what looks like strong reservations about something in their speeches, but then the backbenchers go ahead and vote for the proposal or for the bill, and NMPs often find it very difficult to vote against and may just abstain. Right? What are these unwritten rules? What are these OB markers that our representatives seem to feel that is, holding them back from speaking truthfully, honestly, from their deepest convictions? I mean, Swam, was it difficult to speak your mind and to vote according to your mind?
Okay, one advice I got from a slightly older friend when the results came out and I was accepting that, Swam, stick within your lane, drive in your lane. So essentially is to tell me to stick to healthcare issues. So if let's say, I have a very strong feeling about, feminism, gender equality, that friend was just telling me to, just be credible. I think so. Because even though you don't have a constituency, you don't need to win votes. My personal reputation was on the line, isn't it? As a medical doctor. And that has big impact as well on how the community, my fellow colleagues, the public would perceive me. Or this doctor always talk rubbish in Parliament. That would be terrible. Or this doctor was very aggressive, very antagonistic. Yeah, so that is the public image. That's one. Number two is maybe content and domain expert. I very frankly don't think I know enough about economics, on the national scale, or even long-term policy to be able to direct policy. But what I felt I was able to contribute is to really represent patients, represent doctors in a very niche field, right? Difficulty in access to care and so on and so forth. These are real cases that I can speak meaningfully of and maybe suggest, maybe one way from what I know about your MediSave scheme, you can try these things. But I have to say that in a respectful way as well, because I honestly ask, who am I to tell them what to do when I wasn't there, from 30 years ago when I first conceived. So there was a lot of a difficulty in just my own, expert domain. And now when you extend it to things that I really don't know much about, like I know there's a lot of concept about housing, cost of living, and it's something I feel strongly about, but I wouldn't quite dare to comment that in the public forum, much less in parliament, because I might come across really ignorant about certain aspects. What else was there? There was a vote on the Foreign Interference Act, and I think that one, it was quite near the beginning of our term, I think. And of course, the relevant ministry did make the effort to present to NMPs and went through a deck of slides about what it means, implication, why we should go ahead with it. At the end of it, I still felt, I don't understand. Very frankly, I don't understand why there's such urgency to, update the law and enforce such strict thing. And I think I did speak up against it to say, no, as a medical association, we do meet with, the local regional countries a lot. We invite delegates of our country, from Myanmar, from Taiwan. Would this be as sensitive, a foreign interference? What's the impact and all that? I feel rather hesitant. So at the end of it, when it came to voting time, I couldn't quite bring myself to say no, because I understand the principle. It is true, we do not want foreign interference, but I just cannot understand why must the law be amended to be so harsh. So in the end, we took the easy way out and abstained. Yeah. So that perhaps was very cowardly, but again, I felt I was staying true to myself, not enough knowledge to support, but yet not quite convinced that it is not necessary. I hope, happy to hear any feedback, criticism from the group here, but that was a very real experience I had, during that term.
All right. Thank you for your honesty. I wonder if there are, of course, there are policy issues where we feel that we do not know the nitty-gritty, and as you say, you may not feel then the confidence to vote one way or another. But there are also issues of conscience, right, to do with values and so on. And there we are all human. We're all perfectly entitled to express a difference between right and wrong and so on. Is that something you're comfortable with in terms of going beyond your professional lane, but you're still remaining within your lane as a thinking, feeling human being?
Yeah. So the other big thing that happened during my term was the repealing 377A. So that was great. That really aligned my personal values and my professional values. So I was really touched when that speech of mine was picked up by Pink Dot, and I had so many personal messages of thanks from the community. So some of them are people who are gay, who have left Singapore, and they're usually slightly older adults, people in their late 40s and 50s. They couldn't find a home here, and they left. So when they heard my speech, they said, I was able to capture their sentiments and their confusion and disappointment during the growing up years. So I think that I had no conflict of interest, in speaking up. So I am Christian. I accepted Christ by faith, and I didn't find a conflict with my personal religion. As a person, God wants us to be kind and loving, and I think it aligns with my personal value. As a medical doctor, we have to treat everyone equally. And so likewise, it aligns with my professional values as well. So in that one, amendment, I was fully confident in supporting it. Yeah.
I think that what you raised earlier is to me so important, and I think often underestimated, that Parliament isn't just about policy, right? Singaporeans expect their values to be reflected. And it's disappointing when it is almost too functional and not reflective enough of the best of who we are. And I think that's perhaps the gap that is felt on an issue like Palestine as well. Yeah. But I want to turn to Anthea on a related topic. Yes.
Just to add on the caveat of that. So oddly, you see, I think I didn't quite receive hate speech, but I think that same speech on YouTube had a series of comments that were really antagonistic. One that I really screenshot and I reposted was something like, good for you. I hope all your kids turn out to be gay. So I was like, wow, where did this anger and hatred come from? it's, yeah, I thought it was a very moderate and sincere speech really, in no way offending anybody, and yet someone still found it enough to be offended, and whether it's a curse, so that person obviously feel that being gay is wrong, and then use it as a curse on me and my children. I was like, oh, wow. So it was quite disturbing, and that's, you see, that's one small speech from a simple NMP. So I think I do have to applaud full-time MPs for putting themselves out there and be open to all kinds of criticism. Yeah.
So the role does require significant moral courage to put up with.
I think so.
And on the same note, Anthea, let me show you a question that has come up from the audience about the role of backbenchers and the party whip. Wouldn't it be good if they do away with the party whip so that backbenchers can vote according to their convictions and so on? And this actually, beyond the issue of the party whip, I think this raises questions like, for example, should in general the ruling party be more tolerant of different, I wouldn't say factions, but the Americans call it a caucus. What is the problem? Maybe I'll turn to Elvin and Walid next. Why shouldn't the PAP have, say, a more progressive caucus and be comfortable with it? Or for that matter, a more conservative caucus and be comfortable with it? Why the need for everyone to sing from basically the same playbook? Sorry, songbook. I shouldn't mix metaphors. But Anthea, what is your observation about the backbenchers? Are they, to put it very bluntly, are they really so uniform and cut from the same cloth, or are they compelled to act as if they are all mini cabinet ministers?
Well, thank you for that question. And I actually would like to commend Swam for sharing her experiences too. I think just to add on as well to the last discussion is to say that pressure to be able to balance, right? For your own safety at any level, even psychological safety, and then wanting to be able to do the job well, that's real. And I think all of us have to navigate that. And there's also, for me personally, I've also had the experience, there were hate speech, there were hate comments, because I spoke up, a lot and comment frequently for migrant workers and LGBTQ community during my term. And this was clearly even before the government took the stance of repealing 377A. So some of the speech were definitely less respectful, and many came with expletives as well, right? In addition to hate words. So it's real, it's part of that. But on the other side of it, so not just dealing with the public, but also I think within talking about, the kind of culture that we have and the climate we have within Parliament, there would also be, Swam earlier mentioned, in terms of FICA, there is the sort of the encouragement, the promotion by the ministries involved in drafting the legislation to try to get you to understand it, to try to get you to, to support it in your speeches. And there's obviously also therefore the similar pressure of, if you're actually coming forward to speak against it, there's also the pressure, right? And I personally I've written about it in the book on the NMP scheme when I wanted to speak up on the youth activism speech on the heels of the whole Yale NUS saga. And that was in a German motion that Walter Tessera, my fellow NMP, was making. And when I was going to make that speech, I was actually very nicely and respectfully asked to not go ahead with the speech, right? I did go ahead because that wasn't my speech. I was only the voice, right? It was.
I'm sorry, who asked you?
So a few members of the cabinet, asked me to reconsider putting that speech forward at that time. So that sort of negotiation clearly also happened. Talking about backbenchers, coming to your question, I wonder if our backbenchers have changed and evolved, because when I read the Hansard and that debate, even just on the NMP bill, Cherian, right, in 1989, when it was first tabled by then Deputy Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong, the pushback by the PAP backbenchers like Elvin Ong and Tan Cheng Bock and Abdullah Tamugi, was so strong that it actually forced the government to actually back up and said, all right, let's establish a special select committee, right, to review the bill and then to make, any necessary recommendations after consultation. So I do think, and I hope that with the mandate that the PAP has, and so has the WP, to Walid's point, that I hope the backbenchers do show up with more moral courage, right, in pushing hard on bills and issues that they feel strongly about, because their people, their constituents expect them to speak up about, just like the way we have seen in the 80s and 90s with the backbenchers on both sides. That bill, there was only Cham Si Tong as an opposition party member. To that question about lifting the whip, I think going back to Walid's point, we are a Westminster system. We are, first past the post. I do think that there is clearly a time for us to think about, is this still serving us? Is this very straight out majoritarian democracy still serves us, especially if we are looking also moving towards a two-party system? And we can already see this zero-sum party battle game playing out in the very many mature democracies around the world. Do we still want to stay with this system? Or is there a need to start to create a more hybridized proportional representation with majoritarian system? Because it's not just about lifting the whip if we are still following the Westminster system. It's actually also, to my mind, and I was hoping the NMP scheme provide that check as an institutionalized, independent, non-partisan bloc. But with the recent developments, that relevancy and that integrity is clearly called into question as well. But I do think that an institutionalized independence and non-partisan bloc can be very helpful as we navigate very challenging issues that we have to face as a country.
Right. We don't have a PAP representative on this panel, so let me try to channel what one might say if one were had the honor of a PAP representative. And I think probably I would respond in this way to your observation that Parliament seems have to have less debate between backbench and front bench within the PAP compared with the 80s. And my answer would be this: well, that's only because we have already had those debates privately before the Parliament sitting. Right? Don't underestimate the amount of pushback and to and fro and active debate that happens within cabinet as well as between cabinet and the rank and file MPs, etc. Nobody, there's truth spoken to power. Nobody holds back. Everybody is speaking their mind, and what you see is in Parliament is the result of the resolution of differences through this behind-the-scenes process of debate. Whether you believe it or not, I leave it to you, but I believe that would be the answer. Right? But can I turn to Elvin and Walid to share with us how you think backbenchers could play their role better? And I think the question is especially important because of what we're hearing from some analysts that maybe this is it. This is the most plural that Parliament is going to get in our lifetime. This is Singapore democracy, right? A house where the PAP continues to enjoy a supermajority. If this is it, then of course we have to either, as Anthea says, change system. It's not going to happen, or find ways within the Westminster system to ensure that backbenchers, in fact, add to the plurality of voices. What do you think, Elvin?
Yeah, so just to go back a little bit to that original question that you asked, which Francis Un asked in the chat, right? Which is, given PAP's parliamentary majority, wouldn't it be good if they lift the party whip, do the wave the party whip, and let their MPs speak much more diversely, much more with their convictions, right? To make it more democratic. And I'm going to be a professor here and say it depends on what definition of the democratic you subscribe to. And let me give you potentially two definitions, right? Now, if your definition of a democratic parliament is that it must be very inclusive of very diverse viewpoints, and is that it must have very pluralistic views across the board on every single issue, right? And then, yes, maybe you can agree on like potentially lifting the party whip on almost every issue and allowing the MPs to just speak their mind. Now, however, alternatively, if you have another definition of democracy, which is this is what voters voted for, right? Voters, when they go to the polling booth, they voted for a particular candidate and they voted for a specific party. And when people vote for a specific party, they always have in mind, in their minds, right? This is particular party brand that they are so-called purchasing, right? They have only one chop and they are using that chop to buy this chicken rice, right? And they expect to be delivered chicken rice. They did not chop chicken rice and then they get delivered like, char kway teow, right? So
but maybe they want extra chili.
Maybe they want extra chili. I don't know. Right? It could be, right? And maybe, okay, fine. That you see in a vote share. And then we can go into a whole debate about, electoral systems, so on and so forth. But again, if we build that chain of democratic accountability from people's vote to who is the winner, the winning candidate that is representing in parliament and the political party, right, to the actual policy outcomes that is going to be put forth in parliament or implemented by the government, that whole chain of democratic accountability is theoretically, we have a concept in political science, it's called the responsible party government, right? And so the party whip, making sure that all parliamentarians of the same party vote in a certain way, is what holds that chain of accountability to a large extent at the parliamentary side, right? Ensuring that when people vote for this party in power, they're going to get that output that they have asked for. So you could say that is democratic as well, right? So there are these two competing models of so-called democracy. One is the clear chain of accountability. The other one is to have a very inclusive, very pluralistic views represented to make sure that no one is marginalized. And you could potentially say, in Singapore, we may be leaning too much to one side, and we could potentially introduce more diversity, more debate in Parliament. That is certainly a criticism that could be acknowledged. And I think the PAP backbenchers, I think more increasingly, the PAP also realizes that if its backbenchers don't voice out that much, the Singaporeans will take notice, and they will have criticisms of the PAP backbenchers. They are seen as, for lack of better word, too submissive to the party stance, right? So I think they are quite mindful of that as well. Yeah.
Walid, on the same topic.
Yeah, thank you. So maybe I have a slight disagreement with Elvin, perhaps along the way. I think backbenchers and the cabinet, all of them need to understand their roles. So the cabinet and the political office holders They are articulating policy, they are defending policy. Backbenchers are supposed to critique whether it's giving suggestions, reflect what people are saying. So to Dr. Tan, the advice she received earlier, I think that advice probably is not super apt in the context of a parliamentarian. I understand for the, stay within your lane, right? That advice that you receive, I'm not sure whether, because the lane of a parliamentarian is to reflect what people are saying, and it could sometimes be outside our area of expertise, right? Like for instance, something on Palestine. Does that mean that only an international relations professor can comment on Palestine? We would say probably not. And I think that is the role. I understand for NMPs because people are elected from their own sectors, right, or nominated from their own sectors. But there is no obligation to only represent your sector, right? That the constitution doesn't say that at all. And in fact, NMPs get a vote on the things that gets a vote on everything, right, outside our sectors as well. And I would say that is true for backbenchers as well. And sometimes I think even our POH and our backbenchers do not understand the utility of these roles, or even the function of these roles. Just a couple of days ago, Anthea was, she sent me this article. Well, it was a personal group chat, so I should have mentioned that. But anyway, she sent me this article where then the new Minister of Muslim Affairs, acting Minister of Muslim Affairs, he said he will not stop. Let me just check. So Faisal Ibrahim says he will keep voicing Muslim communities' concerns about Gaza to government. But he is government now. He is part of the government now, right? This is what an activist is. I will not stop reflecting. But you're part of government already, right? You're part of the people who make that policy, so you shouldn't speak like that. I like Faisal, but I don't think that statement was apt as a political office holder. Now, that is the statement a backbencher should be making, an activist should be making, right? Saying that I'm going to reflect my constituents and what people have said to the cabinet. And I think also the PAP needs to understand, the stronger the backbenchers are, the less there is of a need for the opposition. So they should want the backbenchers to actually be even more vocal than the opposition. I think but this requires a cabinet and a prime minister that is very secure. So I guess this is the challenge, I suppose, for the PAP. Understanding that the stronger the backbenchers are, and Anthea is right, it's not just the NMPs. When the GRC was introduced, the Malay MPs actually disagreed with Lee Kuan Yew on it and Goh Chok Tong on it. And this is all on the record, right, in the Hansard. So we have lost that along the way, for sure. I also wonder whether it's because backbenchers today, when they come in, they have half an eye on a cabinet position, or a political office holder position, so therefore they don't want to rock the boat. And I am seriously putting it out there. These are the things. But anyway, I'm saying it is good for the PAP and the country if backbenchers actually challenge the government more, and hence have a more democratically representative parliament.
Yeah, I think this the point you raised about confidence. I think it's under discussed. I think so much of what the government does or doesn't do seems to reflect its confidence or lack of, right? And one would assume that after its impressive performance in the last election, there's no reason why it shouldn't feel confident enough to give its backbenchers as well as activists, right, much more room to express themselves. I just want to, just as a sort of a break, show a couple more.
Cherian, can I just chime in on one more observation that I have? It's also important to understand that MPs, in terms of the way they organize their support, in terms of legislative support, if they actually share legislative resources, then there's also a likelihood that they often may share the same sort of views and take the same sort of stance. And that's not something that we should also forget in the way that the MPs organize themselves, right?
So same input, so same output.
Yeah, because, the way, we all know that the legislative resources in terms of the salaries that are paid for legislative resources for the elected MPs, still very much in the 1980s kind of level of wage. And so many of them do pool this allowance to share legislative resources, right? Whether it's with, I mean, either party, right? I mean, the NMPs and the NCMPs don't get that, but the elected MPs get that. That's also something that we must also bear in mind, that then you could get similar views being put out for different MPs by the same legislative support team.
Right. Let me just share a couple of inputs from our audience. A couple of them drive to this question of how much confidence the PM in particular will have. So this is, I guess, something that none of us in this session have any clue, but it would be something that is interesting to look out for. The next question, also interesting. Do you think we will see parliamentarians use AI to write speeches? I assume they will. I note that the UK House of Parliament in January has already issued guidelines to MPs about how best to use AI. So I assume that they are, in fact, in favor of it, that will actually help them in many ways. I'm going to, I guess, for the last round of questions, I have a couple for Elvin and Walid, and then for Anthea and Swam. And perhaps let's start with this question. What should Singaporeans look out for when deciding how effectively MPs are representing our interests? Walid, do you want to go first?
Yeah, thank you. So I want to go back to what Dr. Tan said. So a few, I guess, wish lists, right, for me, and also wish lists in terms of what I want the MPs to do, but also how Singaporeans should be assessing our MPs. So the first one is, I would like, as Dr. Tan said earlier, for the MPs to speak with clarity. I do not mind anecdotes so much, but I think it does get to a point where, yeah, I met this resident and my resident said this. Yeah, okay, just get to the point, I think. And also one of my pet peeves, I think, is as the father of 3 daughters, and so I find that actually, people may say, oh, what's wrong with that, right? Then I'm saying, if you are not a father, are you not going to have the same moral judgment about that thing? I find that a bit worrying sometimes. I understand they want to relate to people and so on, but I think less of that and getting to the point, making your speeches clearer. Actually, Lee Kuan Yew was not a fan of airy-fairy speeches. I don't know how we lost that along the way. Our parliament...
And by the way, I should also add that Lee Kuan Yew did not believe in sticking to his lane.
Yes. That is also true. Yeah. His lanes are multiple, right? For Lee Kuan Yew. So I think for our MPs, I would like them to speak more effectively and with more clarity. But also what you said earlier, the second one is, in terms of being a moral conscience, one of the things I find that this is true all the way down, I think. Grassroots, a lot of grassroots organizations, instead of reflecting what the constituents is telling the MP, they shield the MP from negative feedback sometimes. Right? And I feel that sometimes the backbenchers also shield the cabinet from negative feedback. Right? So I would like the backbenchers, right, to reflect the conscience of society. Right? I understand that ideally, of course, the cabinet and our policies reflect the conscience of society, and that's what we want to get to as well. But also, the cabinet has differing interests and all sorts of that. But the backbenchers, you should be reflecting the conscience of society. I would hold this for both the PAP backbenchers, the WP MPs, NC MPs, but also the NMPs. I got a shock when I read Kate's report, and one NMP didn't speak up on any of the bills. I mean, literally, you have one job, which is to speak up, right? Okay, I mean, you're still bored. I mean, if you don't speak up. But if you're an MP and you don't speak up on anything, that's a dereliction of duty, I think. So I would hold that standard across for all the backbenchers, right, to reflect the moral conscience of society. And the other one also, I think, I am always more skeptical of people who are hyper-partisan. So when the backbenchers start attacking other backbenchers in a very partisan way, I am extremely skeptical of those people. So I would say these are the things we should be looking out for, these three things. Yeah.
Elvin?
Yeah, I agree with almost everything that Walid said. I would add one more thing in terms of communication and publicity, right? So I hope that be it MPs, be it government ministers, maybe particularly the backbenchers, that they would either have a social media or have a website listing down all the speeches that they have made in Parliament, right? Don't wait for Hansard to come out and direct people to Hansard to go and search for your name and everything, right? Put your speeches up on a website, on a blog, or whatever you may call it, right? And say this is the speech that I made. If you have any feedback after I've made this speech, please feel free to let me know. Solicit feedback from your constituents based on what.
At the moment, if I'm not wrong, I think office holders do that on the ministry websites, although they don't ask for feedback. But you're suggesting backbenchers do.
I'm suggesting backbenchers do that, right? And it is all the more important for backbenchers to do that, because then they can actually know how their constituents feedback on their parliamentary speeches, right? I see backbenchers posting photos of them being at MPS all the time, and them attending constituency events all the time, right? And Parliament only kind of sort of meets like on average once a month, twice a month, right? And there's no reason why they should not put up however they perform in Parliament out there for people to evaluate, to seek feedback and support. It could be as easy as, say, maybe an Instagram post to say, okay, today Parliament debated this. I was there. I gave a short speech to say I agreed or disagreed, or I provided certain contributions in this particular way. Right? I think that brings more transparency directly to the people about what they are trying to do to represent their interests. And I think it goes a long way to help people understand that, okay, parliamentarians are not just meet the people session, they don't just cut ribbons and hold babies and things like that. There is real work being done in Parliament.
Okay, let me turn next to Anthea for this final question to you, which goes to the discussion we've been having, thanks to PM Wong, about a we society, and a couple of questions from the audience about this. What does the government need to do to convince citizens that the emphasis on we is truly inclusive? And do you think the relationship between government and civil society organizations will change if this comes about? Yeah. Since we are focusing on Parliament, how do you hope that this new priority, this new emphasis will be reflected in parliamentary business?
Thank you. Thank you for directing the question to me. But if you allow me, can I also just make sure I don't lose my thought and just also chime in for my fellow panelists? I mean, one of the questions that you raised from Lorraine about AI, and you mentioned that UK had already put some guidelines for their MPs. I would also like to suggest that we put AI for Hansard, right? Because as MPs, when we are actually writing our speeches, to be honest, I don't know how many of you, I'm sure all of you would on this panel, just because of your vocation. But it's so clunky, it's so difficult. And I feel like that's not a Hansard of a smart nation. We better become a smart parliament by bringing AI to the way we can actually get to Hansard. And so then that would actually help to alleviate what Elvin had raised, right? In terms of, the constituents being able to very quickly see the MP speeches. And more importantly, for civil society, the hat that I wear, I can see the responses from the government very easily as well. Right now, there's really a lot of effort. Anyway, I just wanted to put it out there. Also want to shout out to Walid. And I kind of agree more than for MPs, because I felt that in the POFMA debate, I felt like all the MPs from PAP were just coming at me, Walter, and Irene on our amendment motions instead of actually looking at challenging the bill and directing their speeches towards the government, right? So very important for backbenchers to stay the line of holding the government and the bill to account, not to try to put other backbenchers down who are actually doing their job. Okay, so coming back to your question about how do we do this, I've shared this openly before, Cherian. The first time, budget 2019 was my first budget as an NMP. And I was so uncomfortable when the then finance minister keep using, I will give you this, I will give you how many millions, I will give you this vouchers, I will. And then I turn around to Walter, I'm like, isn't that grammatically wrong to start with? Because that's not the money and the vouchers for him to give. But also it came across as really, what is the word that I'm looking for? It's as if this is a benevolence, that, and so I think if we are looking at the we first society, then in parliament and from the ministers and for the political leaders, I think the language must come through as language of partnership and not
patronage, right?
Yeah, not patronage, right? And that for me, I think would be a first way to start. I have to also say that when I was interviewed by Mothership and I raised this issue, Martino, the editor then quickly did a search, and actually Lawrence did use we a lot more than I in his speech last year in the budget. But I think the language needs to come through that you are actually representatives of the people, right? And therefore, we are actually co-owners, of these resources. These are collective resources that we have ownership of. So that, I think, is one that's quite a low-hanging fruit to change if you want to be aligned and congruent to the we first society in parliament business.
It's symbolic, but important, an important symbol.
I think it's so important. I am 100% convinced language is generative of the tone and culture and of your energy and of your sincerity and of the actions that you're going to take, actually. So I don't think it's just descriptive nor symbolic. The next one, I would say, to Hans' question would be what I mentioned earlier, that we need to be a parliament, and from 15 parliament onwards, I really would like us to be able to debate for solutions that are really going beyond just the CDC vouchers or similar schemes that actually continue to perpetuate this very transactional relationship between the state and citizen, right? Because we then become a bit of a customer of benefits, something like that, right? We're not, yeah, I mean, it's not as if we're actually getting the social dividends. It makes us feel like that. So then that's not a we first kind of a society, I think. I mean, look, everyone loves the CDC vouchers. It's the only thing that everyone talks about in the hawker centers. I get that, in my family too. But I'm not really sure they really built a culture of agency. So, we should have the government trust Singaporeans with agency and not just appease us with aid. I think the other, which is probably quite, maybe something that we have forgotten. I was really excited when PetitionSG was going to be put up from GovTech 3 years ago. It was going to be one of those new system, very much like RedeemSG and all that if petitions garner 10,000 supporters within a stipulated time, they will be submitted to relevant ministries. So I guess I'm talking about if it's a we first, then you need to put out more of such platforms, genuine platforms for citizens to be able to participate, right? So I'm pushing for more participation using our smart nation architecture and infrastructure. But this PetitionSG, as you may recall, will actually scrap within a few weeks of it being put out, to the public. So I think those are the things that we should try to bring back and because I don't think the reach and listening type of platforms are genuinely including us and embedding us into the ideation of these solutions always seem to be that, even including the National Mental Health and Wellbeing Strategy, even in the public consultation, it was more that the decisions were made and we were just sort of harvesting some of your views, but not much was going to change, right? So I think we need to really start to have more platforms that allow for a genuine sort of feedback mechanism and participatory, right? I mean, a we first society surely must also mean that it must be a participatory democracy. And that would also mean that we should, as a we first society, normalize disagreement as a form of care, right, for the nation, and not seen as disloyalty. I think that's also a big shift that I hope we can see.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think this issue of participation, I mean, clearly there is some effort taken, but it seems to be very patchy. And this is an issue that AcademiaSG cares very much about, because we do believe that wide consultation and participation, deliberation, including from relevant experts, is important. In some sectors, it happens more than others. We notice, for example, that in the sectors of the arts and heritage, there seems to be almost a deliberate avoidance of the experts that we know, who are, I can't see this as anything other than deliberate, right? That the top experts in certain fields, and I just named two, arts and heritage, are not on any standing committees or boards that are relevant to their work. They may be consulted on an ad hoc basis, but kept away, probably because they actually know more than civil servants and ministers. And I think that probably needs to be less fear of Singaporeans' own abilities and knowledge to be a we society. I'm sure you've seen this as well in your sector, Swam, where the people who know are sometimes deliberately kept out of the room. But I want to turn to you for the final question. I'm going to use this intervention from an audience member to kick us off. Is this a matter of clinging on to any hope, even if it's false, rather than admitting there's no hope? So this panel was put together. This panel was put together precisely because I know that none of you are cynics, right? None of you have given up hope in Parliament as the kind of the supreme forum in the land. We may have our criticisms, but we feel that it can be better. But there's, I guess, challenging us and asking us, are we deluded in thinking that it can be better? Maybe there is no hope. How would you respond to that? Yes, Swam?
Wow. Okay, I think by personality, I'm actually a very realistic person, almost a pessimist. I mean, okay lah. But I choose hope. I choose to be hopeful, right? For personal life, for our work, when a patient is stage 4 cancer, there's a fact we have stage 4 cancer, but there's still hope the medication can work. You have, go college, etc., etc. So when it comes to our country's politics and future, I think the fact that today we have 150, 160 people attending, I think that's remarkable. I've always assumed that a lot of young people, even a lot of my dear friends, close friends, are not interested, apathetic. When you write a speech, you're so excited, right? They'll text, hey, read the speech lah, help me send. And say, okay, thumbs up, emoji, and then that's it. Silence. Then be, hey, how did I do? Can I do better? Any feedback? Good job. And so, I think people don't really care until it affects them. And what I hope to also share with the male people who are describable about for feeling it acutely, to never give up hope. I think there's a lot of people out here who care, just that maybe we never had the right time to connect. There's no appropriate platform for each person to speak up. So, the various routes will be, write to the Straits Time Forum lah, line up, meet your MP. If your English is no good, there are volunteers around to help you advocate. And then depending on which area you're concerned about, sort of gently ask around, and somewhere along the line, you will meet a group of people with the correct skill set to help you advocate for something. I realize that policy changes happen when every element of society is aligned. If it's purely bottom up, it seems like people are just complaining too much. If it's top down, we don't want to implement change. Somehow things have to meet somewhere in the center. Using healthcare as an example right now, I'm sure the locals who have read the news about an insurance problem, a doctor's charges, a hospital fees. So interesting, there's more national interest on this. And then once there's national interest, enough MPs speak up on this matter. There will be various interest groups to talk to doctors, people on the ground, and then someone smart out there formulate a solution and then try to pass it forward as a potential policy change. But that kind of change may take years to happen, right? I'm sure from the two professionals here, it's not something that will happen, just because I complain about it one time and overnight change will happen. So I hope that the people who feel strongly about certain subject don't give up hope, continue to write and lobby in a very calm, sensible manner. I think as a woman especially, we get too emotional, hysterical when we are talking about something excitedly. So by implementing that calm, measured manner, you gain credibility, you get support, and then that's when you get more people to want to advocate for you. Yeah.
And based on your first observations, am I right to say that this hope is a cross-partisan as well as non-partisan issue? We are likely to find allies in different parties and no parties.
Yes, definitely. Because we are all humans. And I think, I would say, yes, everyone in Parliament cares for Singapore. Just maybe slightly different vision of what Singapore should be like, because depending on our background, our circle of friends, the problems that we see in society, and we feel strong about certain subjects. So when people clash, it's over certain ideologies, but the overall viewpoints that we want Singapore to be better. And I think, you will find support among the people.
What a great way to end our discussion on a note of hope from a realist. Yeah. But before we close, I'd like to invite the audience, not straight away, but when you have time, to visit our website, AcademiaSG, where you'll find articles like this one just posted today by Dr. Liu Hai Kun on activist Louis Ng and what his political career says about the relationship between civil society and the ruling party. On the website, you can also register for our next event, part of our Singapore Studies Junior Scholars series. This is happening on the 22nd of September. But finally, I'd like to thank our panelists, Anthea, Swam, Walid, and Elvin, as well as our audience for joining us. Tune in on Friday, not here, but on CNA for the President's speech. And we wish the 15th Parliament all the best in its important work. Thank you to all. Bye-bye.
Good night. Bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.